Thank you very much for joining this morning. We're live from my attic. This is where I'm currently spending most of my days. It's a pretty nice attic, and from this attic, I'm going to talk to you about hosting and scaling your cloud-native apps in the cloud, because the cloud is a great place to do so. So my name is Ishiyama-Levy. I am a Microsoft and Xamarin MVP, and I run a company that does some amazing things. I'm pretty happy to be there presenting again virtually. That's the way to go. Let's dig in. That's going to be a demo intensive session, so a lot of things are probably going to explode. But you know what? Let's have fun. Feel free to interrupt me if you need more information, or I'd like to ask some question. It's okay. We don't have to wait until the end. All right, cool. Let's see if that thing works. All right, so today we are going to talk about just like, as I said, scaling your and hosting your apps in the cloud. So the cloud got better, much better at being cloud quite recently. Like until, like a few years back, it was still like a teenager looking for its identity. It started as a baby like more than 10 years ago or about that, with just like a couple of services like compute, I/O, and storage really. And from those basic building blocks, it started to grow more and more things. So such as, all right, how about we are going to provide some VMs? Okay, cool. VMs are cool. And I'm going to run a SQL Server instance on this VM. Okay, nice. But then I need to maintain my VM, right? So how about, we're going to take care of that, Microsoft ourselves, and simply provide a SQL Server instance for users to be able to use without having to maintain it, without having to maintain a VM, just like let's give it this way. And then it was just like not enough. Say, okay, cool, that's fine. How about, so we got something that is providing services out of the box to users. How about they can run their own little boxes that's got like their own kind of domain to worry about, and then that's pretty much the revolution that is happening on the last few days. That's Docker, containers, Kubernetes, all this stuff. And this is where we really started to get into what we call now the trendy term, cloud native, because this is what it gets. Cloud is now mature. It's got this real building block that it just pretty much thought a long time how to provide what would be really useful, and how it can transform really get workflows and just be able to cater for use cases that were not impossible, unthinkable to cater of before. Like think about just like AKS and how you can spin up just like thousands, millions of containers that will be able to hyperscale your application. That's nice and new. Right, that was the introduction. Now let's have fun. So we are going to be talking about this Tailwind Trader application, which is built by a company called Tailwind Traders. That is, like the main thread that's been going around the Ignite Summit. So they are a company. They've got like a couple of VMs running a old monolithic web application, and they want to get in the cloud. Why? Oh, well, because they're spending a fortune maintaining their own data center, and also they are they are having trouble scaling. Scaling means, all right, I need to buy some hardware and I need just to load balance the whole thing and then patch everything and then keep on going. And if I need to scale down, well, I'll have to sell my hardware maybe, and that's not going to be very cost effective. So those guys are, they take opportunity of the Go Cloud Native initiative launched by the Singapore government and say, cool, you know what, I'm going to build some application. It's going to cost me maybe like 20 or 30%. Maybe in when it's COVID time, maybe the government would be able to help me for like 80 to 90%. Let's do it. Let's do a jump. Let's go cloud native. So the cloud, it can be a bit daunting at times. Just like every other day, you've got a new service popping up, well, you need to keep up to date, which is fun. You do that on Saturday morning while everybody sleeps. Just go to your daily cloud news program and see what's new there. So, but something that is kind of certain is cloud service providers are trying to build and provide tools to their developers for them to build and maintain application in the most more efficient way, quite easily, really. Satish talked about Azure Sentinel a bit earlier, which is great because it's a good way just to solve a problem, which is just like security is a big concern, right? And that is just like novel. That's a great idea, and it doesn't seem to be that difficult to implement. Well, that's what the cloud is about, right? Giving you some shiny toys and providing you a very small learning curve to integrate that within your workflow. So there is no right and wrong way in the cloud. You just really need to pick the tool that you actually need. It helps to know what are the tools available, that's for sure. But ultimately, you can take some small building blocks like VM that are just going to be very close to the traditional workflow, right? Running your stuff on your machine or on your data center. So you'll, as I mentioned before, you'll have to patch it, maintain it, and scale it yourself. But ultimately, you could run a VM in the cloud, take what is on your VM running on your data center, or something that is running just like on a non-virtual machine, and then package it in a container, or just like simply on a VM image, and then scale it. That's possible. If you want something where you've got maybe a bit less control, but like all the a big chunk of the heavy lifting would have been done by your cloud provider, Azure, where you can go PaaS, for instance. So it's just really suited to your needs. So in this session, we're going to be looking at the deployment tool. So that's what is going to take your application and help push it to the cloud. We're going to be looking at the options to actually host this application in the cloud. So this is where that's going to run. Is that going to be in one place in a multitude of services? And then we're going to be looking at basic security features to keep the bad guys at bay easily. Security is just a concern that you can just undo your... Yeah,
Ben,
hello?
Are you sharing the screen or desktop?
Yes, I am.
But we cannot see. Yeah,
are you sure? We cannot see.
Yeah, we cannot see. Can you share the desktop?
That's what I was doing. I was totally sharing my desktop. I'm doing that again. Can you see it again? Can you see it
now we can see. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Well, if that happens again, so again, what happened is my main computer kind of blew up yesterday. It didn't really explode and nobody got harmed, but I need to do a full reinstallation of this thing. So I'm using my spare laptop at present and with a multitude of screens, so I'm not sure how it's going to behave. So let me just show you the beautiful slide of before. There's nothing much. That's first screen. That was a website I was talking about. That's the building blocks. That's Lego. If you don't know what a Lego is, well, that's simpler than the cloud. Well, it depends. Some Lego construction are pretty difficult. And then in this session, we're talking about the deployment tool, so pushing your stuff to the cloud, a deployment option, which is the places where to host those applications, and basic security features, so the bad people don't come and blow up your stuff. So let's talk about the tools for cloud deployment. So, well, you recognize this guy. If you don't, well, you should. That's Visual Studio, my favorite. Been using it since 1999, not 98, but 99, just before the year 2000. With, I think at the time it was like VB4 or VB5. Yep, I've been doing some Visual Basic, not .NET, just like the plain stuff is Complus and all this DNA stuff at the time. So since the Visual Studio 98 till the current version, well, a lot changed. Well, the major change is you got two themes: dark theme and actually three: high contrast theme and the normal one. No, I'm joking. There's much more than that. And something that is interesting to know is I've been just like decoupling it from their Win32 just implementation and just like componentize it as well, so all doesn't go to 1%. That used to make it like super slow and super heavy. Now it's faster, it's more responsive, and it's easier to build third-party plugins with it. So it's been around like for about 2 decades. For Mac, it's been around for about 5 years or so, or a bit longer. It was the Mac version comes from Mono Develop that got kind of taken over by Microsoft through Xamarin. So you can run it on Windows and on Mac. You've got customizable workloads. So instead of installing the whole shenanigan in one go, you have the ability to cherry pick the features that you need. So if you're not going to be doing Office development and you don't care about mobile development, well, not installing that is going to free a bit of space and make the installation substantially faster. So in terms of language, most of the languages under the sun are supported due to the fact that .NET is a portable framework, and ultimately anything that is going to be written on top of it will just still get to IL, intermediate language. So you've got all the .NET family, C#, F#, that's my favorite, but I don't know many F# developers, which is just like the story of my life. It's very, very sad. VB.NET, well, if you're still on VB.NET, it's all right, but you may have a look at F#, it's cooler. Python works there, all the JavaScripts, R, PHP, whatever. Recently I took over like a PHP project that featured files that were like more than 10,000 lines of code. And it could handle it. So that was not too bad. It was kind of easy as well. IntelliSense on Visual Studio for PHP is top notch. So we've got tons of extension, language packs, unit tests. I'm pretty big into my unit testing. So I do a pretty big use of SpecFlow and just like a dedicated unit test runner. Databases, you can plug them easily and so on and so on. LiveShare is cool. LiveShare is, I don't know if you've been using that already, but that solves a pretty big problem, especially in these times of COVID, where we are quite distributed and working from home. But a developer A is developing a piece of code and finds an issue and doesn't know how to solve it. Well, usually the workflow will be, hey, ask developer B, which is at the next desk, and say, hey, or the team lead or whatever, hey, can you help me out? And then the team lead or developer B will be coming to developer A desk, and they will be just like mucking about, and ultimately they will find a solution by just running the application on the Visual Studio instance, running on the developer A's machine. Right now, in the COVID situation, that's not going to work, because if you try to go to developer B desk, you'll be arrested and we'll never see you again. So probably not now, not really, you just get a fine. So what you want to do instead is use LiveShare, which is fantastic. So you are simply going to initiate a LiveShare session between developer A and developer B. And as developer B, you'll be able to have access at the full environment that the developer A is the one with a problem, has got currently running. So you don't have to download the solution, don't need to download anything, but basically what the developer A is having, his solution will be just magically loaded in your local environment, and you can run it, you can debug it, and you can do some changes to it, and then when it's you can call it work together, and when it's sorted, that works. So and even if you're sitting on the same room, well, that saves a couple of steps. So maybe it's not good for your health, because the 10 extra steps you would have walked in order just to keep healthy, you're not going to take them. But then that's also nice. Right, I talked too much about this one. Let's go to the next one. But please try it. Oh, and sorry, something about LiveShare. It works cross IDEs. So you can initiate LiveShare session from Visual Studio Code on Mac, and you'll be able just to share with, I don't know, Visual Studio running on Windows, or Visual Studio Code running on Mac, or just like Visual Studio on Mac. It doesn't matter. It's cross-platform. Visual Studio Code, talking of which, so that's the new kid on the block. It's built based, I think it's an Electron app, isn't it? It's built just like in HTML, therefore you can run it on absolutely anything. The extension it provides are just like staggering. You've got literally one for anything, and they're quite easy to build. So Git is obviously baked in. Whoever is not using Git these days, just like drop me a line and I will tell you to stop doing that. Extensible and customizable, yes, you can just like make it look the way you want. It's HTML, isn't it? And you've got full support for it on each platform. So that's running also on Linux. That is pretty cool. We're going to have a good look at Visual Studio Code a bit later. I think it's the #1 IDE in the world these days. Yeah, it's well deserved. It's pretty good. Right. So now we talked a lot about graphical user interface development tools. all the Visual Studios, but if you are allergic to that and you prefer hexadecimal, if you prefer characters, yeah, you can use the terminal and the CLI. So there's a new terminal in Windows that I'm going to show you, and from this one you can do PowerShell, CLI, Cloud Shell, and even Windows for Linux subsystems if you feel like it. Obviously that runs on all platforms, and you write a script once and you can run it anywhere. So let me show you, that's first demo time, which is there, path, boom, CLI. Well, let's have a look at the Cloud Shell. I don't know if you're aware of this one, shell.azure.com. First of all, can you let me know if you can see your screen? If you can see my screen. Anyone?
Yeah, you can see it.
Okay. And later on, I'm going to switch between Windows and Mac. I'm currently running on my Mac, and it will be good to know if that's working as intended. Thank you very much for the confirmation. In terms of, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, path, it's nice and big. Cool. So basically, I just went to Azure, shell.azure.com, and that's basically my Azure Cloud Shell. That's connected to my subscription. I can just do some good ls. Here we go. That's just like the real stuff. cd Windows or whatever. Yeah, sure. I can do that. And if I just do something like Azure something and say, yes, sure, I can access to all those commands. So you can basically run your and interact with your subscription straight from that thing. If this is not what you want to do, well, you can use this little baby here. So that is the Windows, the new Windows terminal. Can you see it as well? Because I am now on Windows, just to make sure you can see my window in Windows. Hello? Can you see my PowerShell instance? Anyone? Did I drop from the call? Uh-oh.
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see the PowerShell thing, right?
Yeah, we can see it. I can see
Okay,
it.
great. So here I can just like, that's just a Windows PowerShell, and that's great. All the same, that works. I can just spin a new instance of just my normal command prompt as well. If I feel like it, I can also go to Azure Cloud Shell, all the same. That's 0 default directory. Excellent. So that's doing exactly the same thing that the CLI here was doing, except that I'm running that on a Windows command prompt. So and that is exactly the same thing as you can notice. So cd Azure, Windows Azure up, same stuff. Excellent. So let's go back to the slides. So, sorry. So then you've got ARM templates. So ARM templates are pretty useful. That allows you to keep your infra as code. So instead of manually creating resources on Azure using the CLI or using the Azure web interface, that will show actually later, you can use this JSON-based kind of resource creation definition, which are just like, again, templates where you're going to put, what type of Azure resources I want to create, and just populate their parameters straight from this file. So those can be versioned, which is kind of cool. And so you can roll back and go back and see what is wrong or what is right. What I like about it, or anything that is, again, infra as code, it could be this guy, it could be Terraform, it could be anything else, is that it fits into my peer review flow. So now I'm not a big fan of having any piece of code or any piece of anything really not peer reviewed, because that just avoids common mistakes, number one. That just keeps the culture and spreads it. And just for 2 pairs of eyes are better than one in general. So that's what I like. So in our company, everything we do in terms of DevOps is going to be either ARMS, or that's going to be PowerShell, or that's going to be Terraform, but it definitely, most certainly, would be reviewed. So the cool thing about ARMS, it's dependency aware. So let's say that you've got a web server that you want to deploy, and you will have a database, for instance, and then you will have a, I don't know, a queue. The ARM template would be just like clever enough to understand if basically there's no dependency between a queue and a sorry, queue was a bad example, between a web application, let's say, and a web API that it depends on. You would say, all right, cool, we cannot really deploy them at the same time. We need just to get the API running first and then the web application. If it's just a database, say, well, who cares? Let's just do that on the background, and sorry, let's do that in parallel, so it will deploy a bit faster. Right, you've got like thousands of ARM templates that are just available from Azure. You can create your own, and you can learn more about it on aka.ms/AZARM that tells you about the syntax if you want to create your own ARM templates from scratch. Let's now talk about the deployment option, and let's have a look at what we can use to build our solution on Azure. So the simplest building block will be Azure Blob static website. So I'm having a bit of coffee here. Oh, great. So they're super cheap. We're talking about like maybe $0.10 per month, because it does mostly nothing. It's just like a static website that can be as simple as a hello world HTML page to a SPA built using React.js or Angular or whatever, to a WebAssembly application that you could run, that you could write using Blazor, for instance. By the way, Blazor WebAssembly is getting the OK like in next month, I believe. So it will be, we're in April, so in May. So yep, that's going to be the general availability. It's pretty cool. So debugging is now working, which is great. Or any other language that supports WebAssembly, which is pretty much all of them. There is just, I'll have to use a small swear word here. I went through the list of all the languages supported by WebAssembly, which is literally every single one known to mankind. And there is one called Brainfuck, which is a funny language to look at. It's basically whoever wrote that language, the point is to make it absolutely unreadable, and it works. So yeah, static website are anything but static. Well, it can be if you want to do hello world, but if you want to do something super complex using WebAssembly or just a SPA framework, you can do it. Oops. Yeah, yes, right. So then you've got a web app PaaS. So that is going to be taking your code and running it on a web server just for you without having to maintain your virtual machine and your web server. So that's can be client and server side. It fully embraces the Azure platform with ton of included features like scaling, backup, disaster recovery, and much more. It's got all the PaaS feature that you want, and it runs on Windows and Linux at the moment, which is cool. Maybe Mac will be coming one of these days. But at present, Mac is on the Azure world is only for agents on Azure DevOps and backing App Center, so you can build your application, iOS application or whatever, and supports pretty much all the languages. So it's kind of platform and language agnostic, right? So you can build a application using .NET Core, but if you want a Ruby on Rails, PHP, a Python app, sure, go for it. So then we've got containers. So containers, yeah, they're pretty useful. They solved at the very start the works on my machine problem. I just remember when before leaving to Singapore back in London, we were like in 2012, 2011, whatever. And yes, that Docker started to be around, and that was really what we were using it for. It's just like, okay, cool. We just want to make sure that it's running on my machine, and on server I deploy it. And then just it got a bit fancier through the cloud. So Azure's got a few options. The two famous one would be Azure Container Instances. So that one is when you want to deploy a single container application in a quick and easy way, and you don't really want to keep it running for a long time because it's going to be slightly pricier than AKS, but it's much simpler just like to get it out. So let's say you want to test a project out, or you're just writing a I don't know, thumbnail generator, or like you've got a model, so a machine learning model that you want to test out. Sure, put that in ACI. If you want to get like a production level stuff running that will be based on a microservice architecture, that won't be suitable, but AKS will be. So that's perfect to actually go cloud native, right? So you can get your application. So in terms of Tailwind Traders, let's say that you've got a shopping cart, a product list, a payment gateway that are currently part of a monolithic .NET Core application, let's say. Well, you can just like remove those processing parts. So all the APIs that are going to track your shopping cart or just like serve your shopping list and or just like provide a hook to a payment gateway and stuff that into their own containers. And then you can scale them independently and just do some fun. So AKS will be able to orchestrate that for you. So top scenarios for containers on Azure. So you've got the good old lift and shift. So I've got an application running on my VM on my data center, and I'm tired of patching it. So I'm just going to take my VM, or just actually not the VM. I'm just going to take the application that is running on this VM and just stuff that in a container, just like a single one, why not? And then just like publish it to the cloud. So you don't need to refactor anything or very, very little. And it should be running on the cloud. Then you have the microservice part, which is what I mentioned a bit earlier, which is just like, break down your application in just like single responsibilities and then just deploy them independently. And then you can version them independently. You can scale them independently. And that is cool. And whenever you want to change a part of it, well, you don't have to change the whole application. And you can, for testing and regression point of view, it's not too bad. In terms of performance, so it's kind of nice to be able just to scale again in isolation. You can spin your containers instances just in isolation, and you can run some things like machine learning again, just like models, kind of easily. IoT is using containers as well in order to be able to register the application that will need to be pushed on IoT devices, right? Traditionally, you build your IoT application, then you stuff that in a container on Azure, and then you will be able to push it to your all your devices out there that you want just to update with this piece of software. Finally, secure DevOps is pretty cool. So you don't really, what is cool with containers is because you can fragment them based on responsibility, you can also fragment their configuration as well. So a container that will have a configuration that is tied to a payment gateway, you don't want to put that everywhere, just leave it there. And that means that your shopping cart will have nothing to do with a connection string or secrets that are tied to that bit. We'll see later a best way to secure your information when it comes to configuration. And then finally, we've got VMs, which is the granddaddy of the cloud, right? So it's a well-known technology. You must certainly been using or interacting with VMs during your career. So either running on your machine, just maybe you may be running an image of Ubuntu on your Windows desktop, or you've been using WSL, or running a Android emulator on your machine. That's all VM. It supports most technology because it's a blank page, right? You can spin any operating system that you want, just like any version of Windows, Linux, Mac, Amiga, Amstrad, all this kind of stuff. Maybe not Amstrad, but or Amiga really. But and then you'll be able to run the application you need. So let's say that you have an application that has some legacy components that are going to be really, really difficult to find out as a PaaS on the cloud. Let's say that your team built a custom web server like 15 years ago, and your application depends on it. So that's going to be hard to run on PaaS. On the VM, though, well, that's easy to do because you can literally run anything. So that's cool. And it's also very flexible when deploying on scale set. So back in the day, just scaling out VMs was literally, until quite recently, a bit of a pain. I don't know. I've never been a big fan of configuring load balancers in any case. Scale set solves that problem, and we're going just to show how it works. But ultimately, what it does is you create your VM image. So, your custom web server and all their nice DNA or Complus dependencies. Yeah, nice. Or just like MSMQs running just like on the Windows XP or Windows Server 2000. How about that? Windows 2000, not even server. Yeah, whatever. You've got that, you create your VM image, and then you simply create some scale sets that are going to scale from 0 to 1, well, 0, maybe not, from 1 to 100 instances based on this image. And then you can create multiple scale sets that will have just like the different configuration or whatever to cater for different regions of the globe, of your country or whatever. So you'll have one scale set running in North America, one in Southeast Asia, one wherever, and you can scale them independently up and down depending on your needs. And we'll see how we are going to do that right now. So far, any questions? Very good. So I am going to move forward. So let's, let's create a VM. So let me just check that everything is fine here. Yep, nobody's falling asleep yet. Fantastic. So, like anything on Azure, to create a resource, I just, well, we're going to do that through the UI, right? You could do that through the CLI or using ARM templates, but no, not today. Scale set, I can't type. Virtual machine scale set, excellent, create. By the way, I don't know about you, but for the last 2 days, I was plagued with DNS issues, and I am not on StarHub. I am on My Republic, and that was terrible. So yeah, anyway, it seems to be better today, but yeah, preparing for that was just a bit fun. So when you create your, so that's pretty much like the parameters that you need to fill to create your VM, such as a resource group. So if you're not familiar with a resource group, it's just like a container, not a container, so a box. Let's call it a box because containers these days are not a word that you can use lightly. That's just a box where the different resources that are going to be used on a similar project or on the application will be fitting in. That means that you'll be able to manage them just like all together. And whenever you're done with the application, you can delete a resource group, and all the resources that are contained in that box will be disappearing magically. So you should not really have any loose resources anywhere. So you can create a new resource group or use an existing one. Can select your region. You can just like select what kind of image you want to have. So and you can also look at the size. So that is scaling up, right? So I want 4 virtual CPUs, 20 million gig of memory, and so on, and got a price allocated to it. I don't want to do that today because I already have some images. So I'm going to be could be browsing some public images, but I have my own image here, which is my Tailwind Trader VM image, and it's all ready to go. So I already created it. I'm not going to go through the pains of creating it again, which will be like 15 minutes of wait, or 12, or 10, or 8. It is already there. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So that's a VM scale set. So if you look at the overview, we so that's a resource group, right? Would be we see that we've got a couple of resources there. So let me go through them. So first of all, you've got the security part, network security group, and the virtual network. So what it means is you don't really generally want to leave your VMs or any Azure resource, if possible, in the wild. and leave them open for attackers just to go and attack. That's what attackers do. You want to keep them just like in a private kind of environment, which is exactly what that is, right? So that you can use virtual private networks on Azure that will make sure that no one except the authorized users will be able to get into those virtual machines. So usually, that's pretty much what you do. So then you will have a public IP address, which is basically the part that will expose the services that you want to open to the world. In this case, that is going to be this web application, which is there. Oh, by the way, I completely forgot. I didn't show you this web application that they've been building. Let me give you a very small overview. So, yep, that's an e-commerce application. You can look for power tools. Let's have a look at power tools. It's running from Azure, by the way. Like that's the bit that we will look a bit later, right? So I can buy a wooden commode, $50. You know what? It's in stock. I think we should all buy one, a wooden commode. Just look at that. Like the mastery, like the joinery is just fantastic. $50 is given, you know. And then what can you do here? You can log in, which I won't do, and you can do some other bits and bobs, such as uploading a new picture that I will not do right now. But that's basically an e-commerce application. Wow, wooden saw, $145. What I don't understand why this commodity $50 and this wooden saw is $145. And measuring tape at 1, 2, 3, definitely not a bargain. All right, let's go back. So I've got my public IP, and then you have your load balancer. So the load balancer will take requests and say, oh, which is a VM that's got the last load, or that can just take this request, and it will route it to that direction to make sure that not a single VM or set of VMs will be just like using most of their resources, just like split the load equally. And then we have our virtual machine scale set. Let's get there. So like anything Azure, you always have on the overview some pretty pictures. So here that you can customize, by the way, but by default, you'll be able to see the CPU average 0.5%. You see that's like used massively. You can see the network, you can see disk and all that and all that. What we want to have a look at is at the instances. All right, so actually, yeah, let's have actually, no, you know what, let's go here first. Let's have a look at the scaling first because it's easy. So if you, at present, we can see that we've got like only 2 instances running, right? But if I wanted to scale to, let's say, 83 instances, I just press save, and then my bill will go up to the roof, but it will work. The load balancing balancer will be able to load balance between 83 instances, and that would be great. So if Black Friday is around the corner, you could scale up manually, or you could use some parameters to auto scale. So for instance, let's say that, hey, if the average of my VM CPU is hitting 80% for 5 minutes, please spin 5 more VMs. And equally, you can scale down. You can say something, if like all my VMs are less than 20, CPU is less than 20% of usage for 10 minutes, please scale 2 machines down. So that's pretty cool. You can get some more complex scenarios, but that's a bulk of it. Let's have a look at the instances now. So I've got my 2 instances, not my 83 instances, because I would be blowing it a little. So you can see that I'm just looking at one in particular. I can see the CPU average and all that. If I wanted to connect to that guy, I could. So you could, the best way to connect is not by, well, you could connect through RDP, but here we're going to show you how to connect using SSH. So I'm just going to take note of my user, that's me, benadmin, at that address. Fantastic. And I am going to show you how to connect to it in a minute. Let me just set that up. Okay, so you could be connecting, hold on, that's that screen. Yes, so we could be connecting to this virtual machine just using a command prompt or whatever. What I like is using Visual Studio Code. Can somebody confirm that you can see my Visual Studio Code at the moment, because I'm running it on Windows? Just want to make sure that it is there. Anyone? Don't be shy. Hello?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Cool. So here, what we want to do is just to use Visual Studio Code to connect via SSH to this virtual machine here, right? Cool. So I am going to go first to look at the marketplace and fishing for extension. Remote. So we can see here we've got some remote to Windows subsystem for Linux available. We've got remote for SSH, which is what we want, and remote for containers. So the cool stuff about, like, for instance, remote for containers, that will allow you to connect to a container that is running on your local machine, or to a container that is hosted on a VM running on your virtual machine, or to a container running on the VM running on the cloud, and so on and so on. You can connect literally to absolutely anything. Here we are going to use a SSH one, and it's already installed. Once it's installed, you will be able to see this little green box on the left-hand corner. That looks a bit like the Xamarin logo, but that's been a little bit messed up. So here we can see I could connect with WSL, SSH containers. What I want to do here is I'm going to connect to a host. I already prepared my connection host file that is simply going to provide my username, where to connect to, and also the path to my key, my SSH key. By the way, the SSH key, if you want to know how to set one up, you simply need to run this command. So SSH keygen, and then you use the type RSA, and you want to have a 248 byte encryption, and you'll be able to save it to somewhere, and then you just tell pretty much this config file to look for it, and you'll be nice and happy. So here I'm connecting. It's going to ask me for a few things, please, and that's a passphrase for my SSH key. I won't tell you what it is, but if I open it properly, I should be able to get on my remote. So far, the demo seems to be working. So I want to have a look at my terminal. My terminal is there. Cool. See, I am definitely not on Windows here. I am on Linux. Let's check. Yeah, cd dev. So let's have a look if it's working. So I'm going to create it's a nice Linux command touch super text file, supertext.txt. Yeah, and does it exist? Yeah, and I can go vim super text file. Oh, well, I will not vim to it. Let's vim to a new file.cs, and we can see that things are here. It's fantastic, and I can hit it. Great. So that works. But yeah, you know what? So that's cool for people that like command line. I like them, but I like user interface as well. So in order to have a look using a user interface, look at that. I go there, open folder. Sounds good to me. Where I want to go? Dev. Okay. Open it up for me, please. It's going to ask me for my. Yep. And sure enough, suddenly I am on the Tailwind Traders. Yeah, cool. So now I've got my my directory view. Okay, I can open this file. Yeah, a lot of things. I can go to my new file and go like, hello, and I can save it, and then it will be there, and I can prove it because I can go here, I can go there. And well, whatever. You follow my drift. It's nice and easy to connect remotely securely using SSH, and then you can develop in real time as you wish. Questions? No? Great. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And I need my PowerPoint presentation up. So we created a VM. It's great. So now let's have a look at the PaaS option, right? Because VMs are great, but it's a bit difficult. I don't necessarily want to maintain them. I like PaaS. So let's have a look at the basic stuff. So, yes, no, sorry. Let me go back to here. So, is it the right place? Yes, it is. So now we're looking at the PaaS version of the web application, and I can show you that I'm not joking. That's the website here. If I want to browse to the website, I just going to copy that there, up, and I am on Tailwind Traders. That's the real stuff, right? So this is what is currently being run. So let me go back one step behind. So that's a resource group for this PaaS application, and we've got a couple of things. So first of all, we've got an app service and app service plan. So app service plan is going to tell you the property of the app service, which is, hey, I want to have like that amount of RAM and that many processors, and then on top of this app service plan, you'll be able to add a certain amount of app services, right? So the app service is basically here, just give some code to run some application. That's just going to run it. I don't need to take care of it. I can run PHP, Ruby on Rails, in this case, that is .NET Core. App Insight that will just provide you some useful information about the usage of your application, just like any logs that will be just like a request log or whatever, that will be there. And then we've got a SQL Server database and a SQL Server on PaaS. So again, I didn't need to install that on the VM. That is done for me. You should be probably familiar with that right now. So let's have a look at the app service. As per usual, it's Azure, so we can see the data in, data out, and also pretty diagram, which is cool. So let's have a look at scaling. So where is my scaling? Here we go. So we can scale up and scale out. Scale up means that I just want to run my app on a bigger machine. So at present, I am on the that's costing me a fortune. It should be on the smaller one. I could change it now, but I will not. Or you can scale out. Scale out will be, again, so currently it's running on one instance. You know what? Let's put it to 23 or not. Or I can, again, auto scale, as explained before on the VM. Same story. If my memory usage is getting up to whatever, please spin some new instances. All right. Then we've got the configuration. So here, that is going to be looking directly on my app config. So you know your app config for your application will be right here. So if you look at my MongoDB connection string, sure enough, it is there. And I could modify it and it will be absolutely fine and so on and so on. So, but the problem is here, I'm not a big fan of providing the values for secrets straight into my configuration file or just readable for everybody on Azure here. It should be a bit more protected. So let's figure out how we do that. So far, so good? Yeah, good. So let's say that I just created a startup, which is called a super startup, and we have a super cool new stuff. So I am going to be, I just basically so far I've got like a database, I've got like a couple of queues, I've got like some VMs or some whatever, couple of secrets, and I'm just like leaving them on some post-it on my desk or on a text file on Notepad somewhere. Cool, in order to access that. Now, you know what? The application is getting popular. Fine, we've got 3 people. I just run and set up an instance of Microsoft Teams, and maybe I'll share the credential in one channel there, so my 3 developer can have a look at it. Not too much of a problem. It's not great, but well, whatever. So now the problem is our application is getting on fire. We've got funding. We can hire some more people. That is great. So. What is happening? So my 3 developer will be sharing again the same way on Teams the credential with those guys. But now, because we're getting big, we need to have a QA, a dev environment, and a staging environment, and a whatever environment. And each of those environments will need to have different set of keys. So it's getting pretty crazy. And now it's just accelerating. It's just like we're #1 app on the App Store, and everybody is just like passing the settings on the word of mouth situation. That's getting quite insecure to a point where an incident happened because Brad, that guy there, just was sipping a coffee somewhere and left his laptop open. An evil person took a screenshot of all the secrets, posted that on Reddit, and we've got a security breach. And because all our secrets are just all over the place, we don't have a very easy way just like to disable that. So we're in trouble. So what do we do there? All right. So this is why we've got something which is great, which is called Key Vault. So let me just show you how it works quickly. Demo is more important than Blob, and let's see what we're doing on time. Not so much, so I've got 10 minutes remaining. So let me show you how it works. So we could see a bit earlier that the MongoDB connection string got a name and the value of it, right? Just like the connection string. And I don't want that to happen. So have a look at the source here. We can see that everything is coming from app.config, except this one. It comes from Key Vault reference. Let's have a quick look. And here we can see that it's a bit different. We've got the top bit, which is name and value, all the same. But at the bottom, we can see Key Vault reference details. Why is that? Because of this bad boy here. We're just telling the application configuration on Azure, hey, that is coming from Key Vault, and that's special, please. So we're going to provide it the secret URI, which is going to say, hey, this is where our Key Vault resource is, and we want to look at the secret repository, and we want to be looking at that key, and we want to be looking at that version. Surely enough, this is exactly what this guy is saying. That's the Key Vault name, that's the key, that's the version, and so on. So let's have a look at the Key Vault. So I can click here. And we'll show up. We could create one, right? If you wanted to create a Key Vault, you do the same thing. Here, BAF, you look for Key Vault, Key Vault, and you'll be able to create one, provide your details, and there we go. Key Vault basically costs almost nothing. We're talking about a couple of cents, maybe $1 if you are just like unlucky. But it is really, really cool. And it just, well, you need to use it if you don't do it. And I'm going to show you how. So here we can see just like the usual pretty picture of Azure. You can store keys, secrets, and certificates. So here in our case, we're looking at the secret. And the secret is this Tailwind Trader connection string. So we can see that we've got the current version is this one, which was the same version that was shown on this configuration file. And then we can look at the details, which is, again, that's a secret identifier, the bit we saw before. Can set up an activation and expiration date. And then that's the value here that I will not show you. So that is great. If I wanted to create a new version, all I need to do is just click there and enter my value and save it. Mind you, just creating a new version is not going to update the tie-up or the reference anywhere else, right? It will simply just create a new version. Then you need to go anywhere else and update it. But what is cool is from a single location, you can say, please disable that thing, right? You can expire it, or you can just like, yeah. So if you got a security breach, you can easily simply disable these things and create a new version. So everything is up to date nicely. Something else is just if you wanted to create a certificate, which I kind of like, in order, let's say, to sign, if you're running identity server in order to manage your OAuth flow, you could sign your JWT certificate. And the way you could do that is simply by either importing a certificate here with your password, your file, and you will access it exactly the same way as shown before, or you can generate it, which is cool. Straight from Azure, you can generate your certificate and it's there. That's a really cool feature, by the way. So yeah, it's kind of easy. Something to know is just you can access it as we did a bit before by looking rather like configuration by looking at by setting it a value to Key Vault, but you could also do that program. You can access Key Vault programmatically as well from your application using a set of API. That works as well. All right, I've got 7 minutes. I'm going to go really fast. Already, I might just be overrunning of 2 minutes, but then I won't do more than that. Cool. So Key Vault keep you in control. Yes, that's great. So the flow of Key Vault is just pretty cool. So you just don't want to provide all the access to Key Vault to everyone else. You want to have like the master of the key, which is your security officer, which will be creating the Key Vault. It's going to be choosing the recovery option, set up the login, the backup, and so on, right? And it's then going to punch in those keys into the Key Vault, the certificate, and so on. Then it will also set up the permission that will say, all right, only a QA will be able just to have a look at the values, but developers won't be able just to look at values. They simply will be able to access it. Same for your application. The application will only have read-only rights to go and fetch these secrets. And yeah, and therefore, basically, you will be assured that your secrets will only be able to be accessed directly by anything between 0 and let's say 10 people that will have access right to peek into this key vault. So something to know about Key Vault, so you can manage all your secret in one place, right? So that is kind of cool. If something bad happens, you can disable everything in one go. You can seamlessly move between dev, QA, and production environments without having just like to maintain various files all over the place. You can update your credential in one spot and update everyone's credentials. You can enable and disable your credential, can version, then you can set an expiry date, and all this credential is instantly available to all developers. So that's kind of cool and super easy to use, as I demonstrated. So yeah, that's a lot of stamps that mean that it's pretty secure, and accreditation are aware of that. So what's happening behind the scene is just Key Vault's got a special treatment because we know that developers and entities are going to store some highly confidential information here, right? And just cryptographic keys and all this jazz, right? So the physical security in Azure data centers is actually different than anything else. So it's enhanced security. So the access to the specific areas will be restricted and yeah, just like monitored much more than anywhere else. So it complies with a lot of stuff, and for good reason. Yeah, Microsoft takes care of it and offers it at a price that is basically almost nothing. So I'm liking it very much. So now you're going to tell me, hey Ben, don't you need credential to access Key Vault? And are we getting into a chicken and egg situation again? Well, you'll be kind of right, but we've got something called Managed Service Identity, MSI, that will be solving this chicken and egg situation. So the way we do it, basically solve the problem of needing credentials to get credentials for your production environment. So your app needs to be registered with Azure AD, right? And then it is exposed to a local endpoint not accessible outside your local host. And then, well, that lets you get valid credential for your Key Vault, which will give you the rest of the credentials. That's kind of cool. So you don't need to know about it. You just need to tell Azure, our application is registered with that, we're friends, and then my application can access all those details. If you don't register your application with Azure and just attempt to register access those key value, so those secrets in Key Vault, well, you'll get a well-deserved computer says no. Right, and if you want to know more about AD, you can do that. Just go to akms/talk-aad, and there's trove of information here. AAD is a beast, but it's being used in so many cases that you ought to know about it. And then, so does it really need to be all in the cloud? So, well, not really. So first of all, you can, let's say, have a database server running on your on-prem instance, right? SQL Server running there, and you've got like a web application or like a web API, let's say, in the cloud, and you can absolutely tell your web API to the cloud to access your SQL Server instance on your on-prem, and the way you do that is just like on-prem, you'll have to set up your DMZ accordingly, and on cloud you put an application gateway that will act as a two-way bouncer in order to make sure that only the authorized traffic is authorized there. Mind you, there is Azure Arc that is also solving this problem, but that's not the topic of it today, although it's pretty cool. And then and that works also the other way around, right? You can have a database server running on Azure and your API, which is on-prem, and you can just like basically have both of them talk to each other. But then you can also have, let's say, a Xamarin application. I like Xamarin in order to consume some services on Azure. So there's a ton of stuff that are cool for mobile application on Azure. So first of all, like the stuff that we use a lot is serverless. Instead of using a monolithic web API, we prefer to separate the concerns and use PaaS as your functions to put your shopping cart and present your products and so on, because you can scale them independently, and it is elastic, so you don't have to worry how it scales. It basically auto scales, which is kind of nice. And you may want to use something like Notification Hub that basically manages messages for you, push notification for iOS and Android very, very easily. So there is a trove of services tied to mobile development on Azure. So Tailwind Trader just created a Xamarin application that I'm going to show you, and it's just running on serverless. It works really, really nicely. Let's do the Xamarin demo. So let's see if everything is running fine. Yes, it is. So I should have a reflector running somewhere. Give me 1 minute. That's going to be quick. I still need to get back my instance of reflector here. Can't get it. I'm going to kill it. And let's get back to reflector. So reflector will just help me to present my iOS application to the desktop. So now the connection of my iOS device has been a little bit tampered with. So I've got difficulty charging it on or connecting it with a Thunderbolt cable. But because when COVID, I cannot really get it repaired. So that might be okay. Cool. That seems to be working. I'm getting a code somewhere. Yep. It was set up a bit earlier, but up. Cool. Can you all see? Can somebody confirm you can see my mobile application?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. So I'm ready. I need 2 minutes and I'll be done. So I'm going to run the mobile application. Looks pretty much like the web application. You can just browse product. You can look at this fantastic microwave that costs only $100. Buy, that's my advice, shopping cart and so on and so on. So I just want to show you a simple kind of, let me just take a picture. A simple service that just brings a bit of smarts to it all. Hello, how are you doing? That's me from my phone. I'm going to take a picture of the microphone that I'm using to speak to you right now. By the way, that's pretty cool. We're using that for my work. It's got like 4 microphones and the sound is pretty good. So take a picture of this thing. Okay, and I'm going to use a picture now. And what it will do, it will just like start a process on the cloud that will run a ML model and will just try to figure out what that is. So now it takes a little bit of time to process. And because I've got only 2 minutes, I may have to show you an identical picture that I took a bit earlier. Yeah, so that is one, a close-up of a brick wall. Which it's obviously not. So that's cool. So we've been consuming an application that is in the cloud. Miguel de Casa just liked the photo. Wow, fantastic. Miguel de Casa is a guy that created Xamarin. So let me go back to my slide in order to conclude that part. Microsoft, invent with a purpose. Yes. So the point of this presentation is to demonstrate that there are multiple ways to build your application or to host your application on the cloud. The best way is just to, if you're not familiar, is just to take baby steps and just start with the workflows that you're comfortable with. So if it's VM, that's VM, that's cool. If you want to be a little bit more adventurous without learning curve, maybe go for PaaS and just try out a couple of things there, Azure Function would be a good one to try. Especially what is great with Azure Function is you can hook to, let's say, a queue or just like to a table insertion record or just like again to a HTTP call by just providing like a simple attribute without having to reinvent the wheel. It's super cloud native really, and it's just designed to work as such. So that's and just would like to figure out what you like to do with the cloud, and because the sky is the limit. While I've got 1 second, I'd like to mention something else super quickly. Me and my company are currently helping out Microsoft Japan COVID radar 19. What does COVID? I should have prepared that before COVID radar. GitHub. COVID radar 19 GitHub. Oh, it doesn't work. I should have prepared that a bit earlier. Okay, it's not going to work. I'll find out later, but ultimately in Japan, they're trying to open source a COVID tracker, all built with .NET and Xamarin. And if you have some free time to spare, you can help out. I'll find the link and post it on the channel a bit later. I think we don't have much time for questions, but if in case we got 1 or 2, but I suppose that nobody's got questions, right? Do you have questions? No, we don't. Do you? Maybe not. Yes, no, maybe? Great. René, I think that I am done with my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and that you are going to do some great stuff with the cloud.